Okay. We record these events so that we can create podcasts and air the events on the radio, which is a great collaboration with CKTZ. So people will enjoy the content that's shared today for months to come, and that collaboration is through Folk University as well. So Amanda, thanks to Folk U for the collaboration and the partnership. Okay, we're going to jump in. So the flow of today is we're going to hear from three speakers, and as they come up, I'll paste their bios into the chat. And we're gonna run through three speakers, and then we're gonna have a discussion, questions, and have an opportunity to really ask them for additional information, clarification, thoughts, things that we missed. And I really encourage you throughout the session to write into the chat any comments that you might have or questions that you have, and we'll be monitoring them. Amanda's agreed to help me. We'll be monitoring them and trying to make sure we get them answered. Because it's a Saturday and they are very busy people with other things going on, we're going to release them at around 11 o'clock. And then there's an opportunity for anyone that wants to stick around, including our speakers, but just to talk about the implications for our community. What have we learned, and what does this mean for us as ways that we could chart a course based on the information we've gathered today. So it's just a free-flowing discussion. That's more a chance. Really, I'd love to hear from you as like, okay, we learned this, and here's what I think what we should be doing on Cortes. So that's just a free-flowing discussion. And we can't be in a room together today, or we aren't in a room together today because our three speakers are elsewhere, but this is a chance to just have a dialogue. So if you're feeling like you have a little bit of extra time and you want to stick around, I really would encourage you to do that. And that's the flow of the day. And I have asked Mark Bonesh and Robin as our two political leaders in our region that are with us today to share any kind of observations to kick that off. So those of you who have done enough Zoom meetings know how the chat works. I encourage you to open up the chat now. I would love to hear where are you physically, and what if you're not on Cortes, where are you? Just in the chat, just so we can kind of get a sense of where we are at. And anything about your housing. Are you renting? Do you own? Are you in a co-housing environment? Are you on land shared with others? Any thoughts just about kind of what your living environment is like? And, you know, housing is so important as shelter, but it's also so important as community, getting to know your neighbors, getting to know your co-dwellers, getting to know the folks that you care about, that care about the community as well. And so, you know, I'm really passionate about this topic, because it's more than housing what you all are building in your communities. And it's just so beautiful to figure out how to build caring communities, people that are living together in community and taking care of each other when in hard times and good times, sharing meals and childcare and elder care and gardening. And so, yeah, take a moment, fill something out in the chat. If you're seeing we got somebody coming in from the US, and looking for others. Gabriola, Steve is here with Gabriola, who is running their community shuttle, which is a great service, one that we also want to learn from, and we will be learning from next Tuesday. We're going to have a transportation learning forum that I'm going to be facilitating. It's a similar one to this, but it's on transportation. We'll be learning from 6 different transportation providers in our region. So if you don't know about that, shoot me an email or check on Tideline. Yeah, keep it coming. Anyone throw in the chat there where you are located and what your housing is like, anything you want to share in that regard. And before I hand it off to our first speaker, I do want to just acknowledge that here on Cortes, it's like we've been in a pot of hot water, slowly warming up, warming and warming and warming, and in a way, like, once it's boiling, you realize just how extreme it is. And we're kind of at that simmer point on Cortes. And we've been working to address housing here. We established the Cortes Housing Society. We've got 50 acres that we've purchased. We haven't been able to build on it yet. And we haven't yet figured out how to deliver the housing that our community needs. And so today is a chance to learn about other examples, because we are blessed to have that land, and now we need to be creative in figuring out how to deliver housing on it. And I think the community land trust model and the other co-ops and some of the other models that we're learning about today are an important part of that can be important part of our toolkit. We also just bought our first housing on Cortes, and that is we are really using that as our first land trust, community land trust on Cortes. It's got two houses on it, and our doctors in the community will be using it for housing for the locum doctors. That's been a real challenge, and they're out there trying to get Airbnbs and find ways to house the doctors. So that's a great first step. I'm really excited about that. And we have the opportunity to build additional housing on that land as well. And so today is a chance to learn about that. So that's kind of it for me. And I'm going to now introduce our first speaker. And I want to say today's kind of an auspicious day because today is International Community Land Trust Day. I think it's a weekend, maybe, is it, John? And so this is
yesterday and today.
Yesterday and today. So it's kind of this is a chance to for us to celebrate International Community Land Trust Day. And John is on a nonprofit organization on the board of that is really leading that movement. So we'll be learning more about that throughout the morning. Amanda, if you're willing to put the bio into the chat. John is, I was introduced to John by a mutual friend, and it was just a blessing when I met him. He's traditionally a, I'll put your bio in there, John. John is traditionally been a planner, and there we go. It's in the chat for those of you that prefer, that want to read about it. And I'm trying to juggle lots of different screens here. So John is a city planner, and his practice and writings have focused on community land trusts and other methods, models of community-led development on community-owned land. So you are like a godsend for us, John. And he's a founding board member of the International Center for Community Land Trusts. And he also serves as editor-in-chief of the center's imprint, Terra Nostra Press. So we are really, really lucky to have John joining us, and thank you for making time on this auspicious weekend to be with us. So I think I've made you co-host now. So John, you should be able to share screen if and when you want to do that, and I'm going to hand it over to you now.
Okay, let's see if we can figure out how to do this. How does
it's working?
It's working. By golly, I always wonder whether it's going to work or not.
Yeah.
All right, let me see if okay. You have to bear with me here. I can't quite figure out how to there we go.
And John's full bio is now in the chat, so we should be able to see that. And we can now see your screen, John. Looks good.
All right, how about that? You can actually see it. I'm very pleased.
Yeah, amazing.
Well, particularly because I'm on the other side of the continent. I'm over in Burlington, Vermont. So if there is a thunderstorm anywhere between here and there, you may lose me, but let's see where we go with this. So I've been asked just to do a quick overview of the Community Land Trust. As you were just told, I'm on the board of the International Center for Community Land Trust. We've been around for 6 years, and our focus is mostly internationally, trying to seed and support CLTs throughout the world. We do it through a lot of free materials. We have the largest virtual library of materials about community land trust anywhere. And we're trying to do it in multiple languages, not just in English, but it's a work in progress. As Sadhu told you, we also have our own imprint, Terra Nostra Press, where we offer a lot of materials about community land trust, trying to lift up new ideas, innovations in the world about CLTs. And then we are the co-sponsor of World CLT Day. And today is the second day of a 2-day session that's being celebrated around the world. A lot of our partners are in Europe, where there has been an explosion of community land trust in Belgium, France, and England in particular. The European Community Land Trust Network, knitting together CLTs from throughout the region, is having its first AGM today in Berlin. They scheduled it to coincide with World CLT Day. Our center is also working with fledgling CLT movements in the southern half of the hemisphere. In Puerto Rico and Brazil in particular, they're very active CLT movements trying to get started. Australia is holding its first AGM today. Their first network annual general meeting is occurring today, again, to coincide with World CLT Day. In Canada, there is also a network of community land trust. If you decide to go that route, you will not be alone. According to the Canadian CLT network, there are 22 CLTs in Canada that have already been established, with another 9 in formation. Down here in the lower part of North America, there are 308 community land trusts that are sprinkled across the U.S. and Puerto Rico. All the dots represent CLTs. The ones in red happen to be the ones that we have just recently interviewed or surveyed for a research report that we're doing, looking at how cities and counties are lending support for CLT development. The first community land trust that we point to as the first modern day CLT was created in 1969 in Southwest Georgia. It really emerged out of the Southern Civil Rights Movement. The organizers saw it as a way to consolidate the gains of struggle, to take the gains, political and legal gains, one step further into economic development. I won't speak about that first CLT, but I'll point you to a nice 20-minute documentary about it that was created by two of our colleagues, Mark Lippman and Helen Cohen, a number of years ago, just telling the story of new communities. Now, community land trusts are very diverse in their structures, in their applications. And, I just grabbed some of the logos of the CLTs down here in the US, just to say that, even in the logos, even in their names, there's a lot of diversity. So, and even across the world, even more so. So every CLT is not structured in exactly the same way. At the center, we needed to come up with an elevator speech, a short description that would be a generic category, a generic description that could capture most of the CLTs, most of the work being done around the world, rather than trying to shoehorn everybody into one narrow definition. And, that phrase kind of corresponds to the key elements in a community land trust. It's community-led development on community-owned land of housing and other land-based assets that remain permanently affordable. Now, in the US, traditionally, we thought of the C in CLT, that community aspect of community land trust, in a very formulaic way, where you had a membership organization that was divided into 2 parts. One part were the people who lived around the land holdings of the nonprofit organization, the CLT, and the other part were the folks who lived on the land or used the land of the CLT. And each one of those 2 categories of membership got to nominate and elect a third of the seats on the board, with the last third reserved for professionals, other representatives from other public interest organizations. in the service area. Most CLTs in the old days were started from scratch, a brand new nonprofit organization. Today, an increasing number of CLTs are nested within a pre-existing nonprofit organization or community foundation, Habitat for Humanity affiliate, or they're started there, incubated, and spun off. So they're not all started from scratch. Here's the L in community land trust. Most community land trusts are a dual ownership model where one party owns the land and another party owns the structural improvements on the land. And the owners of those structural improvements can be individual homeowners, businesses, other nonprofits. It's the ground lease that ties the interest of the parties together. I think I lifted a picture of a house on Orcas Island. And I think when Lisa talks about her CLT, she'll say, "Oh, yeah, that's one of our houses." The illustration I have there is of a single family detached house on land owned by the nonprofit. But the fact is that almost anything you can do with land, anything you can build on land can be done through a community land trust. And this little study we're doing right now of 115 CLTs in the United States, we've discovered just an enormous diversity of uses and applications of the model. It's not just about single family houses anymore. It's about rental housing and co-ops and condos and non-residential development as well. So among those 115, these are just the counts of the individual organizations that are doing these kinds of things. And it adds up to a lot more than 115 because most CLTs are doing more than one thing. CLTs hang on to the land because it becomes a platform that allows the community to decide what to do with the land and who should benefit from the land, and to lock those preferences in for a very, very long time. So in the world of CLTs, those are two sides of the same coin. Equitable development and sustainable development interact, intersect, and reinforce each other. When we talk about how long sustainable development, we're really talking about stewardship. It's about the land and the housing that have been entrusted to the CLT's care. The CLT doesn't own the structural improvements on the land, but through the vehicle of the ground lease can exert long-term support, control of the buildings themselves, even though the CLT doesn't own them. And what it's concentrating on mostly is preserving the affordability of those homes, those businesses, those farm plots, making sure that they stay in good repair, and to make sure that they never go into foreclosure. The CLT is there as a silent partner to step back in, to intervene, to protect the homeowners, to protect the improvements, even though they don't own them. Yeah? Our colleague, former executive director of a CLT in Albuquerque, used to describe those three aspects of stewardship in a very nice phrase. She described her CLT as, "We are the developer that doesn't go away." Well, that's pretty much my very quick overview of it. The only thing I would add is to say that what CLTs have discovered is that while each one of those elements of the CLT is important, community, land, and trust, the real power, the productivity, the appeal of the CLT happens at the intersection of all three, that the real genius of the model is where they overlap.
Amazing. Thank you so much. You are 10 minutes. You are exactly on schedule, which is unheard of. And that's such a really helpful way to frame what's happening, this movement that Cortes can be a part of. So, John, we're going to hopefully we'll come back to you with some discussion and questions. Thank you so much for that overview, and really for your leadership. You've clearly been on the ground doing this work for a very long time, and that kind of leadership is really just amazing, and I really want to honor that. So thank you for all that you've done and for being here with us today. It's wonderful. Okay, we're gonna move on, and don't forget, in the chat I've put the bio for our next speaker as well. There's opportunities to put in the chat any questions or comments that are coming up for you. And just looking at the kind of some of the places that people are joining us from. We got lots of folks on Cortes. We've got Quadra. We've got folks coming in from Gabriola. We've got folks coming in from the Olympic Village in Vancouver. Tracy is on the board of a co-op that's part of a community land trust, so that's great to have you here. We've got folks from different parts of Cortes. Laura Patrick, welcome. She's elected on Salt Spring Island for the Islands Trust. So thank you, Laura, for joining us. And another person from Salt Spring, Gabriola. So yeah, it's really neat to see folks coming from throughout the region and a little south of the border from us here. So now I want to introduce our next speaker, Sandy Bishop. And Sandy's the executive director of the Lopez Community Land Trust, which she co-founded in 1989. So been at it for a long time, and I've perused their website and read about what they're doing. It's really inspirational. So I'm gonna Sandy's bio is in the chat there, and she's pulling up her PowerPoint. So Sandy, I'm gonna hand it over to you.
Okay, can everybody see and hear?
Yes, we can see and hear. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you for this invitation. I really appreciate that we Islanders are getting together and having a few minutes to share amongst ourselves. And I look forward to hearing more from you as you start up more community land trusts from Cortes to Salt Spring, etc. So I want to introduce a little bit about Lopez. You will probably, those of you who are living on the islands will probably recognize a very similar trend. We have, a small population, and then it balloons in the summer. We have about a little over half of our homes are occupied year round. 5% of the year round homes are CLT homes. We have vacation rentals, that are undermining some of the stability of our housing market here. And then want to just say there really isn't a shortage of homes in these islands, but it's just access to affordable homes is what we really find. And so, yeah, as Sadhu said, we started in 1989, and that was because housing that year took a giant leap of just under 200% increase, and we were concerned. John did a good job of explaining what community land trusts do. The community, the land, and the trust are all parts of that. We have 4 primary areas that we focus on: housing, affordable housing, sustainable ag and forestry, and development of cottage industries and cooperatives. These are our purposes, which I won't read to you, but you will find them on our website, and they probably are purposes that you see, a variation of among a lot of community land trusts. So from everything from serving as a model in land stewardship to holding land in trust, but land is key to everything that we do. Again, you probably are familiar with these, but I just, it's hard to figure out in 10 minutes how to really communicate 35 years of work. But I think some of the challenges that we face are probably some of the same challenges you face. There's this high cost of living, but low annual wages, because most people gain income from other than work. That's through rents, dividends, that type of thing. There's this limited access to land. We also have an aging population, and our farmland is attractive as estates as opposed to, you know, providing access to year-round food. John did also a good job of how affordability is achieved, but this is just, you know, I mean, you can see through this model, the community ownership of land, and then you use a 99-year ground lease, and there are multiple ways that you can stabilize your community, from single-family homes to farms, condos, limited equity co-ops, rentals, etc. The key is always the community ownership of land. And again, focusing on community really helps strengthen, I think, everything you do. So building community from the ground up. In our program, we use a lot of sweat equity among the folks that are going to be living in the homes, but also invite interns and others to join us in this. Let me see. Oh yeah, the homeowners. All three of these women happened to be pregnant this year that we were building, and they were wonderful to build housing or homes with, because they were really into nesting and very, very motivated. Yeah, some of building together. These women could not lift, you know, above their shoulders, couldn't go up above their shoulders, but it was wonderful to have them. They actually shingled every house on the site just up to shoulder length. And again, you know, part of community is the way we make room for each other. Interns come from all over the world. We've had people coming from, you know, 12 different countries. They are a wonderful asset for a community of islanders who are aging. It's good for us, it's good for them, adds new and fresh ideas, and we get to share skills, and they lend themselves to us. One thing we've learned over the years is by allowing people to build beautiful spaces, they are more likely to care about them, steward them for the long term. Because again, we're in this for a couple of 100 years, so you really want to emphasize stewardship. On Lopez, we focus a lot on cooperatives. We've built 7 cooperative neighborhoods. We have some rentals. We hold just under 1% of the land on Lopez in community land trust, and that is there are also a land bank and a preservation trust that also hold land. We have agricultural leases as well as land for housing. There's a wide variety of folks, different incomes that we serve. The average is around just under 70%, and a wide variety of life experience of people that we are able to serve. One thing that's interesting is by creating community-based housing, you also stabilize, you know, institutions like a school, for instance, because a lot of school-age kids live in these homes. This will just go through neighborhood housing cooperatives and some of what they look like. The reason we focus on single-family homes is insurance companies will not allow interns or homeowners to volunteer if we do shared wall construction. And so we tend to build a lot more non-shared wall or single families. We started looking at net zero neighborhoods, net zero energy, because the high cost of operating a house was kind of frightening, and it was taxing to people. So we've introduced a lot of energy savings, ways that people on a daily basis don't have to spend so much on their housing. This is just a photograph of another Another one of the couple of the co-ops. Again, people do most of their own design inside for kitchens and, you know, the interior space, and we tend to focus more on the exterior and the bones of a house. We've got some projects under construction right now. I mentioned a little bit about net zero energy and why it's important. There's the health. There's also people are terribly depressed, I find these days, about climate situation, and by introducing you know, net zero design into housing, I think it lifts people's spirits a little bit, and of course it helps protect them from rising costs by just introducing design. I like this slide because it just shows what the average use is. Even people who try to use in common ground, who try to use as much as the average, they find they can't just because of the design elements. So you see a Washington State average at 1041 kilowatt hours, and then the highest in common ground is 700. And I'm sure if they lived in a different type of house, they would be just as high, but it's a way to encourage, through design, encourage, you know, less and less dependence on fossil fuel or other types of energy sources. Basic design here, you can see a couple of bedrooms, a flex room, quite simple. And again, focusing on the beauty. In addition to building, there is that community act, you know, the community approach, and community is really important in community land trusts. I think it's what binds us all together, regardless of what's happening. We need each other to get through these times. So the community aspect is always been important to us. Feasting together, building together. And a couple decades ago, we noticed something interesting, that creating affordable housing really was a way to create, they served as incubators for development of local businesses. And we continue to see that year in and year out. People stabilize their housing, and next thing you know, they are investing in development of a small business. In addition to housing, we have sustainable ag and rural development. We focus on farmland for food security, but also in addition to food security, it's a way to help the community understand that community land trusts are really, the land becomes key to holding our community together for the long haul. And those are just a few photos of that. We're trying something new this year, building just an ag, a house for ag-related worker. It's got a specific design that we're working on. We're going to see how that works as a model. And again, these are some programs under SARD that we're involved in. Keeping the school kids happy, healthy, and focusing on stewardship from very, very young. It really starts to ripple out throughout the community, that there is this stewardship that runs through everything that we do. We have a grain CSA, community supported agriculture, that we do, and have a couple of mills available, electric car share. And I know Opal also is started an electric car share. These cars are purchased through a grant through State Department of Transportation. And then we, each of the co-ops has access to use the car. And here we are sharing some resources with our local representatives and governor. And we also work with a lot of institutions or higher learning, whether it's University of Idaho, University of Washington. This is Bainbridge Graduate Institute. We find that by working with universities, it's helpful in getting younger people involved, engaged, and understanding community land trusts. This is just a list that we put together of awards, and we've always thought it was really odd that we get so many of them. But then it came to our attention that not very many people focus on marrying affordable housing with net zero energy and green design. And we would like to promote, of course, much, much more of that. I really like this quote. This is from, well, it just says, when I came to Lopez, I wanted to be an architect of buildings. After I left Lopez, I wanted to be an architect of community. And he was an intern that came with us and studying in a school of architecture in the South. And I really appreciated that he saw the value, not just of creating a built environment, but creating a built environment that really supports community. And that is it, a 10-minute look at about 35 years worth of work. So thank you.
Wow. Thank you. Amazing. I'm in awe. It's really, what a beautiful story. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think there's a boat trip or road trip combo that's needed to come and visit. So we're going to keep moving just in the interest of time here, but we'll look forward to seeing some questions come in on the chat. So please, folks, if things are coming up for you, throw them in the chat and we'll jump into the questions. I'm going to move on to our next speaker. So thank you so much, Sandy. So Lisa Byers is the executive director of Opal Community Land Trust in Eastbound Washington, which is on Orcas Island. And she's been doing that. She's been in that role since January 1996. She was co-founder and first board president of the Northwest Community Land Trust Coalition and the National CLT Network, which is now called Grounded Solutions Network. She currently serves on the board of the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance. So thank you so much for joining us, Lisa, and I'll hand it over to you.
Hey, Sadhu, thank you. So one of the things I love about listening to Sandy talk is to be reminded how the underpinnings of the community land trust model may be the same, but each of our islands, each town makes it its own. And so we are your sisters to the south in the Salish Sea. I have been to Cortes, love it up there, love the whole Salish Sea, and we'll all share in co-stewardship of this really spectacular place. So Opal and Lopez Community Land Trust got started right around the same time. And in both places, we were seeing the same trends. So it was the mid 80s when islanders started to really get concerned about that price escalation. And quite honestly, it was bad then. And I don't think anybody at that point imagined how bad it could be, which is where we are today. It's even worse than it was when the organizations were started. So the blue line on this chart shows you the change in the median house price over the 35 years that our two organizations have been in existence. And the purplish line shows you what it is that household that works in the community could generally afford to purchase. So then I add in here, the green line at the bottom shows you our history of providing affordable home ownership through 110 homes that we have added, and then another almost 90 resales. So it's about 200 resale homes that have sold at a price that is affordable for folks who live and work in the community. So that first side talked about how this is permanent affordability or perpetual affordability, and with that comes perpetual responsibility. John talked about stewardship is the term that we now use to put in place the structure of the organization that enables us over multiple resale transactions and hundreds of years to balance the nonprofit owning the land for community needs and benefits, combined with an individual or family or business that owns the home or the structure, and them having a modest equity gain that enables them to live out their lives in a more secure and financially sustainable way. Our role as an organization is to monitor that ground lease, the relationship between ourselves and the homeowners, to support them. If they face a rough time, we can be an extra partner for them in thinking about how to get through stormy times. We facilitate each resale. So we have one member of our staff who supports and guides the seller of a home, and one member of our staff who supports and guides the purchaser of a home. We provide homebuyer education to any new purchasers so that they are fully aware of what they're getting into, and what it means, how's home ownership different from renting. We make sure that we maintain good relationships with lenders to ensure that we always have loan products available for people who want to purchase the homes and get a mortgage. And then, of course, we develop new housing on a continual basis. So at this point, we have added 110 homes to the Orcas Island community. We've done that by buying land, designing, developing, and building whole neighborhoods. We've also bought existing houses and converted those to the Community Land Trust model, doing some renovation to those along the way. We've accepted donations of existing houses, and we've also accepted donations of buildings that are located in other places, and we have moved them. Because we are a community-based organization, we respond to what it is that our community tells us is needed. And starting about 20 years ago, it was really clear that the community needed more rental housing. So we branched off into doing that as well. We built two projects that were new, and then we have purchased and renovated and are now managing 3 other properties that have rental housing. We also provide land on which commercial or community facilities are located. About 20 years ago, we started with our first 99-year lease with a nonprofit water utility association. And then at that same time, we created an office space where we rent to small businesses. And it is a little bit of an incubator space, similar to what Sandy was describing for sole practitioners. And then we are in the process now of a new project that is a community campus where the Community Land Trust owns the land. We've raised the funds and purchased the property. On that land, we will be locating permanent facilities for our food bank and our community resource center, which is our social service agency. And OPA will be building permanent supportive housing. We have also created a slightly different program, which is a social impact loan fund, where individuals in the community make loans to OPAL. We call them investors. OPAL then pools that money and lends it out to individuals who have not been able to obtain a bank mortgage. We provide technical expertise to help those folks during as a bit of a bridge or transition. So during the time that they borrow from us, we hopefully move them from a place where their financial profile or the property that they are borrowing on goes from being unbankable to bankable. As Sandy pointed out, it is all about community. That is why we are here. And we do it through these physical means and ground leases and legal tools and financing and lots of things that are complicated. But at the heart of it, it's about our neighbors and wanting this to be a community where people thrive. So we have over 450 people living in Community Land Trust housing. We think that's about 8% of the year-round population, though for various reasons, our nation's 2020 census was a little skewed. About 29% of the school-age population on the island lives in OPAL homes. And we have a higher representation of individuals who are Hispanic or Latina living in OPAL housing. And I'm just going to circle back to this and say again, to sort of underscore it, that most people talk about or get excited about, oh, you're going to build new, you're going to create new. And really, it is the long-term commitment, the stewardship, that is the most important thing when you're figuring out how to set up your organization. How are you going to fulfill that promise over time? What's your business model to make sure that you can manage those resales, provide the guidance? We have recently, for instance, had neighborhoods that have gotten to be 30 years old, 25 years old, and our homeowners need to replace a roof. They need to keep painting the houses, and there are ways in which we can support them through mass purchasing and a little bit of project management that makes sure that those buildings get maintained. Just you're worth always sort of keeping in mind that this work isn't all that easy. It comes with challenges, and there are trends that occur. We continually find that continuing relationships with banks to get mortgage financing can be a bit of a challenge. We'll find one loan originator who really gets what an elegant model it is, and that there's basically, we've never had a foreclosure. The foreclosure rate for community land trusts all around the country is way below the national average. But still, it's different. And so mortgage lenders are inherently conservative, and they don't like things that are different, even if they're better. So then getting the sources of subsidy, we've seen a 15,000% increase in what's needed over 30 years. And it's really quite humbling, the degree to which we need now grants and donations to reduce the cost of what it takes us to deliver to a price that's affordable for the individuals who are going to be living in that home. And then funding stewardship. It is not the thing that is easy to lead with. People want to fund new, they don't want to fund, maintain, or keep going. And then trends around the country. There is a really burgeoning interest and acceptance of community land trusts. I can actually say that that has been growing consistently and has spurts in my 30 years of doing this, being involved in this work. There is an increased scale of the demand for housing, as sort of my first slide demonstrated. And in my tenure here, we've gone from the community as a whole sort of questioning, like, why is that needed? That seems weird, to, hey, you guys, you've got to do more, you know, you've got to do more. What have you done for us lately? We need more of what you're doing. And that is the end of my little presentation. So I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much. I'm inspired and slightly daunted by just how incredible your models are and how far we have to go here. So it's really, thank you very much, Lisa, and to all of our speakers. Thank you for taking time. There's a few questions that have come in on the chat, and I've got a few that have kind of brewing for me. So maybe I'll just start to the three of you, looking at, I guess in some cases going back 30 years. What are your thoughts, kind of recommendations for getting started? As I said, we've just purchased a 3-acre property with a few houses on it, and the opportunity to do agriculture and more houses there. We've also got 50 acres, which is centrally located in our community. Yeah, just, any thoughts that you might have for us of how to, and the 50 acres that we bought has been community funding. We've raised over $2 million from the community to help make that happen, and just raised over $1 million to purchase this additional property. So the strong community support. But I guess I'm curious to hear your thoughts of where do we, what's the first steps in this journey, given where we're at. And maybe I'll go in reverse. Lisa, if any of you want to jump in, but Lisa, if you want to jump in first, if anything comes up.
So I guess I would answer this in part based on ground truthing what's true in your community. One common thing that I have recommended to startup organizations is choose one thing, do it, and do it well, so that you get proof of concept in your community. When you're faced with an overwhelming layer of need, it can be tempting to try and dive in and do a lot. But if you get too scattered, I think you risk eroding your credibility going forward. So I'll offer that as a thought.
Thank you. That's super helpful. John or Sandy? Sandy, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I really second what Lisa has to say. And I also think you've already started. I mean, you've got land and you've got houses and you've got community support, and you've got funding. I would really focus on your community vision. Maybe you've already done that, but ground it in the resources that you currently have. You know, the land and the homes, and get a lot of buy-in. And as Lisa said, focus, do it well, set up a good stewardship program, and yeah, eventually things come together.
Thanks.
Yeah, I would agree with both of those comments. I particularly encourage people to do what Lisa encourages them to do. That is, do one project, learn how to do it, and then the beneficiaries of that project are going to sell your organization to other people, you know, because you get supported or you get killed more by whispers than by anybody standing up in a public meeting challenging you. So that whisper, that buzz has to be really good. The only other thing I would add would be that, you know, I think of community land trust as being on a tightrope between their community on the one hand and their public funders on the other. Yeah, you got private lenders, you got the bankers and all that, but they really, you know, most CLTs really need the equity that comes from the public sector. In your case, from a city, a providence, whatever. And so you have to keep both sides really happy. You can't fall off that tightrope. So you have to pay really close attention in the early days to the community, to doing just what you're doing today, educating, uplifting, answering questions, not bristling at skepticism, because a lot of people are going to say, what is that about? And then on the other side, you have to do the same kind of relation building, selling, marketing with public officials. So, and it's hard having, you know, basically you have two bosses. And a CLT that's successful usually navigates that relationship of standing in between the grassroots community and the public funders.
Great, thanks. I'm with some other questions coming in on the chat that I'm going to jump to, but I guess I would love to hear your thoughts, how you ensure long-term affordability. Like that chart that you showed, Lisa, where you're even, you know, you're lower than you've continued to maintain the affordability, which is very impressive. And I guess particularly interested to understand what the mechanisms are around resales, and, you know, like all of our costs are going up, whether it's the cost of borrowing or energy or materials, and you've maintained that affordability. I guess just kind of curious if they're, in particular, when people are selling, Lisa, like they build a home on CLT land, and then they're going to sell that home, and they put their sweat equity into it. Can they benefit from the sweat equity but maintain the affordability of the land? So Lisa, this is a question to you, I guess, particularly, but others jump in. But what are the mechanisms by which you're kind of like ensuring intergenerational affordability?
So the legal mechanism that ties together the community ownership of the land through the nonprofit and the individual ownership of the building has a number of elements in it that distinguish the type of ownership from what is the traditional fee simple ownership. And probably the two most significant are the resale formula that is in there that takes the original value that the first home buyer purchased that price for and then escalates it forward in some manner. We have become big fans of a fixed rate, not tying it to any index. We do 1.875% per year. And that there's an exercise that I always encourage every community go through in terms of looking at the history of changes and trends and demographics in their community, along with their particular goals and hopes, so that they can have a really thoughtful process around that resale formula. That said, we've changed our resale formula, I think, 6 times over 35 years. And that's because we found that as much as we were trying to project something, when we checked back on what was happening, we weren't meeting our goals. So we've now stayed with the same formula for close to 10 years, and I think that we might have the one that matches our community. And the second piece that I'll just touch on that I think is an important piece is that the community land trust ground lease requires owner occupancy. So this is not a residence that when you lease on community land trust land that you can purchase it and then go live on another island somewhere and rent it out for a profit of some kind. You live there, you know, the idea is that we're serving local people, and that's a requirement of the ground lease.
Thanks. Next question for Sandy, for you. Curious to kind of, in our culture, we have a sense of ownership being important. Like, you know, that's kind of your nest egg. You have the control, the privacy, the individuality to when you own. And yeah, I think a lot of people come to rural communities to have that little piece of land that is their kind of domain. And I guess I'm kind of curious in the model that where people are building homes through a co-op structure or another structure on the CLT land. Just kind of curious do they feel a sense of ownership of the community as a whole, or like kind of what's Lisa was talking about where the home is built and owned by the individual. I guess I'm curious if I understand it. In your case, Sandy, the homes are kind of built by individuals working together, but those homes are owned by the community. And so I guess just kind of interested to understand what that journey is like, and kind of how people feel a sense of commitment and long-term stewardship in the context of maybe not having the ownership.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so when we introduced the model in 1990 or 1991, it was actually introduced by a banker. She basically said to the 7 households that were chosen to, you know, have the first community land trust homes, that not a single one of them was bankable. And she either recommended we change the model or that we changed the people. And all the people were already committed and really wanted the housing. So we changed the model. And in the beginning, it was challenging. People didn't really understand cooperative ownership. But because we have people build together, they have the responsibility of owning this as a co-op, but they have individual rights through an occupancy agreement or a proprietary lease. And many of them feel the best of both worlds. They realize that they are lower income. They can't always wind their way through a big issue with septic or roofs or siding or whatever, and they can rely on each other. Yeah, and I think over time, you know, now that we've done 7 different neighborhoods of cooperative housing, people spread the word amongst themselves, right? And to others saying, it's kind of the best. You know, you're not beholden to a landlord. You do have a lot of rights. You do have some, you know, additional responsibilities to the whole, but you do have a lot of rights that are maintained by a homeowner, and those are embedded, your rights embedded in that ground lease that you have. And so what we've found lately is that more and more people are just attracted to it. I think because there is a level of comfort and that fear of not having access to my own, you know, and my, you know, just being able to exercise your rights as a homeowner have really been reduced. And Yeah, so over time, that has lessened. And also, you know, you have to realize that we put a lot of subsidy into these homes, and then we have a limited equity formula. So they are purchasing these at maybe a $10,000 equity is their share sale. And that is getting a 3% simple interest annually. And the amount that they are able to save from not being on the open market renting, many of them have invested in their own businesses, or they've taken, you know, additional funding because their housing monthly payments are so much lower, and they invest that way. And economically, I mean, it typically works out well for anybody that has a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit. For those who don't, it just works out well because it's a completely stable monthly payment for them.
Thank you. Great. John, this question's for you. It's coming from, but I'm going to ask Lisa and Sandy to jump in as well if it feels like you want to contribute in. But Laura's asking about conflict and community opposition. And John, I guess I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts. Is having that bird's eye view, and you're doing a study now on 115 communities. You know, like the NIMBY kind of, we don't want this density, we don't want these people, we don't, you know, like all the things, the fears that come up for people when they hear something's happening. Kind of curious. Laura's asking how are they keeping the broader community involved, and how are they dealing with opposition to their projects? So John, any trends, anything you see across the country? And then Lisa and Sandy, any kind of specifics that you're kind of how you're doing that?
Well, community land trusts are not insulated against NIMBYism. I mean, given who we're trying to serve, the population we're trying to serve, the fact that we're taking real estate off the market, we're doing development. I mean, anybody who is against development, period, is against those kind of people living next door to them in general, is going to be against the work that we do. The opposition to the community land trust per se tends to be far less than the opposition to development in particular. Now, we deal with that opposition here in Burlington and in community land trusts around the country by wearing two hats. If we are a developer, we try to be an organizer as well, so that you know, we don't just foist projects on the neighborhood. We educate, we involve, we hear their voices, we bring them in to help us design the project. And we have a structure on our organization where people who live around the housing in the neighborhoods that we serve also can become members of the organization. They can also serve on the board. So, you know, anytime a community land trust loses sight of community, and a community that's broader than the people they serve on the land in their housing, then they've lost the C in CLT, and they're just another developer, and it's a lot easier to attack just another developer. Lisa and Sandy, I'm sure you have some experience in your islands with some pushback from time.
I wanted to weigh in too and just say John, you and I had a chance to talk a while ago, and you kind of, the community organizer part of that you really emphasized with me, and part of that conversation is the output is the speaker series we've been doing, just where we're learning together as a community. So I just want to acknowledge that, appreciate that message, because it's really, we're on a learning journey as a community, and you know, it's great to see so many people from Cortes and outer islands as well, you know, other islands participating today. But that this learning journey is part of building community in this way. So I want to acknowledge that and thank you for your guidance. It's got us to this point. Lisa or Sandy, anything else that you want to add to that point?
I think I'm going to just underscore that staying rooted in the needs of the community is huge. Engaging the community in what you're doing and having them inform and guide you, and then doing what you do and do it well. And don't overpromise. Your credibility then sort of compounds over time, and those voices that John talked about are, when criticism occurs, then the community speaks in opposition to that criticism instead of putting you as an organization on the defensive.
Thanks. Andy?
So yeah, in 1989, I would say that Lopez Community Land Trust won the record for the most hated organization ever on Lopez.
Wow.
And probably have maintained that.
Oh,
But what happened was there was a group of people. So the State Department of Natural Resources and the county had found a 40-acre piece of forested land near the Sharks Reef Sanctuary. Now, if you know anything about Lopez, that is like primo. And they wanted to sell it to the Lopez Community Land Trust to build 8 homes on it. And we, of course, wanted it. Well, that was sort of like offering Lopez Community Land Trust, this group of people, a sacred cow to butcher. And so people got very, very, very upset. And what happened was eventually we ended up just purchasing in the Lopez urban growth area, whatever that is. It's just a designation, but it's a more dense development. But what it triggered was all this fear about how dare you bring those people in who prefer to live in trailers and put refrigerators on their porches when we've all retired up here and we've worked all of our lives, etc. But it unleashed something that I think we weren't prepared for. And it took, so we tried dealing with them for a few months. And then, I don't know, we just decided, what the heck, let them have their fears. We'll go about our business. We will build our vision. And if they don't like it, there's not much we can do about it. But it was amazing because as soon as we started building and they saw how we built together, what we built, who we were building for, everybody wanted a part of it. They wanted to be a part of it. So just, there are things I think that happen in the organization, and you can't always know what cow you're about to, challenge.
Well, it sounds like you've all said we need to be prepared for some opposition. There's always people that don't like anything happening. So ride it out, I guess, and work with community. I just want to acknowledge we're over time and to say to our 3 speakers, thank you so much. I know Lisa has to drop off in 2 minutes, and John and Sandy, I want to thank you and let you go as well. You're welcome to stay, but to let you go. And really just to say thank you for your leadership in this space and for sharing with us. If you ever want to come up to Cortes, we would love to host you and allow for you to share your model with us in a more depth. So please know that we would love to host you here anytime, and I'm definitely going to be coming down for a visit. And thank you for taking your time today on a weekend and whatnot. So really appreciate that. And I just, maybe we could all say thank you to them in some way on our screens here. Thank you so much, and really appreciate your time. And if you, so we're going to let them go, and they're welcome to stay, but they're also totally free to go. And anyone is, this is a kind of a breaking point. If you got other stuff you want to be doing, everyone on the in the audience is welcome to go. You're also welcome to stay. And I would love to hear from Robin and Mark, our 2 elected officials, in any kind of observations, thoughts, things that you have, takeaways that you kind of want to share. And so maybe both of you come off of mute and feel free to jump in. I do want to acknowledge I've got some board members for the Cortes Housing Society that are on. I want to thank them for being a part of the learning journey. So I want to thank folks for being a part of this. in particular our board, who are helping us on this, figure out a path forward. So Bruce Partridge is here, I think, and I think Bill Wheeler maybe is on. So I do want to just acknowledge our board. Okay, so Robin and Mark, come off of Zoom, jump in. Love to hear your thoughts based on what you're seeing in our community, and the conversation about equity and opposition and ownership. And so yeah, Mark, Robin, jump in.
Go for it. Do you want to start, Robin, or you want me to?
You go right ahead, Mark.
Okay.
Yeah, this is your home turf. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, well, grateful, Sadhu, for all the leadership at the Cortes Housing Society, all the board members, community members that have really been pushing progress on Cortes. It's really inspiring to see what's been done in other communities, and obviously we're not reinventing the wheel here, which I think is excitement, because we know it works. This is something that works. This is something that can be done, when Sadhu and I chat about housing, it's like, there isn't just one solution to it. We have to look at it in multiple ways. And one of the ways that I think often gets neglected is the affordable land ownership and home ownership part of it. There's a big focus in lots of places to create rentals and to create affordable rentals. But I deeply believe in that there's a lot of people that are looking for affordable places to call their own. As far as the opposition goes, one of the things I've learned is that, you start doing anything, someone's going to be upset. And what I think has worked so far on Cortes, and which I'm really excited about, is the amount of polling and surveys that we've done, and that we're operating from a place of community will. And it's clear on Cortes that we have a strong majority of people that want action on housing, they want innovation, they want new things to happen, and they want progress. And despite having, often loud 20 to 25% of people that are opposing it, I think one of the takeaways I've been is that we can't focus our energy there. We really have to focus on the majority of people that we're serving, the facts on the ground around the needs. When I saw the chart that showed I think it was the Orca Island presentation on the cost of listings, we have the exact same chart on Cortes. Well, our survey showed that the average person could afford a $209,000 mortgage. The average listing price 2 years ago was $794,000. So a huge disparity. I think we're well suited to really get the ball rolling here, and the fact that we have land, that we've got the political will, we're following leaders and models from elsewhere that work, and I feel really hopeful. And I haven't always felt hopeful, and I'm just excited that we have on Cortes such great leadership and all the different organizations that are trying to make housing happen. And I think one of my questions to the panelists that maybe I should have asked earlier was, the role of municipal government in this, because that's what Robin and I are looking at here. Is like what can we do to address the zoning issues, and make these sort of models possible in our communities. And the last thing I'll say is that when I came into this position, obviously my goal was to make some change on Cortes and to address issues and get things done. But I really believe that the other thing that's really important to me is that we are a model for other places, and that we can really be setting an example for other places in British Columbia. These are problems that every community is facing, and I'm excited to prove the model here and to be a showcase for other places that want to take action as well.
Yeah, thanks. And your leadership has been really important to that. John and Sandy, we're the first community, I think, in Canada, I don't know, at least in the province for sure, that takes the hotel tax, is 3% hotel tax, and allocates it to our organization to support housing. So that was a big move. And normally that money goes to support the promotion of more tourism, and that money is going to support affordable housing here. So that was a big first that Mark pioneered and got approved. So that was just one example of many kind of things that are happening here. Robin, love to hear any thoughts, kind of from. Maybe before we get to Robin, John or Sandy, any thoughts to Mark's question, just about kind of the role that your local government plays in supporting land use changes, zoning, funding, other ways? I'd love to hear any responses you might have to Mark's question.
Sure. Sandy, you want to go first?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of municipalities, first of all, if you are an elected official, understand the model, because people will ask you questions that they will never ask anybody else. So that's number one. But it all really comes down to policy and land use and finding sources of revenue. Having that partnership. That's what I think is super helpful between municipalities and nonprofit private organizations.
Awesome. Thanks.
I just add that we're in the middle right now of doing this study that focuses exactly on that in the United States of what are cities and counties, less so states, but particularly cities and counties, local governments doing to support community land trust. And I did a similar study back in 2008, and the comparison of today to what was going on in 2008 is quite dramatic. I mean, we have far more cities and counties that are donating land, that are putting equity into projects, that are providing operating funds for community land trust startups, paying for technical assistance for an early, a startup of a new organization, using their regulatory powers, density bonuses, parking waivers, waiving setbacks, allowing mixed use development. We have inclusionary zoning in a number of communities where, private developers are being incentivized or mandated to provide a percentage of affordable units in any project they develop. And then the community land trust becomes the steward of those units. So it's quite a mix. I'm struck by the fact how many cities and counties today are taking the initiative in helping to start community land trust or serving on the planning committee that crafts the community land trust. So it's a true preservation partnership rather than just waiting for 5 years until the CLT proves itself before the local municipality becomes involved in the CLT. So a lot of, kind of a seismic shift over the last 12 or 13 years in governments becoming partners in starting CLTs and in supporting the projects.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, totally. When I used to work for the city of Vancouver, we collaborated with the land trust and provided land and all sorts of other things. So that really resonates for me. And it's like figuring out, okay, how do we do that in our community? Yeah, great. Thanks, Mark, for your thoughts. And Robin, any kind of observations, thoughts that you have?
I'm really grateful to have been able to sit in and listen. I think it was really inspiring to hear what's been happening and for how long and how much success there has been. It's really amazing. I think the things that really resonated for me were about the sustainability aspect of it. We're on islands. Islands are finite. And we really have to, I think, maybe more so than in other places, be really focused on sustainability. Water resources are finite and so on. So I think that really resonated, the sustainability, and also integrating food security and affordability was really amazing to me. Like thinking about how a community land trust can not only be providing a housing which is affordable for members of a community. So it's building community, it's creating long-term sustainability, and there's also the growth of like that sounded like they often became like small business incubators because people had a little bit more security in their homes, so they were able to create businesses which are then increasing the sustainability of the community. So it just the intersectionality of all of those things, the affordability and the business incubation and sustainability and food security was really amazing to me. So I guess those would be my the things that I really am taking away from this.
Yeah, thanks. Your comment really resonates for me too, because it's, I think so many times we think about affordable housing, like I said at the very beginning, as a house, or an apartment or whatever. And it's like these examples, this model is demonstrating so much more than that, like economic development and food security and resilience and environmental leadership. And I think that, to me, as I'm on the board of the fire department here, and Mark pulled me into that, and now I'm the chair of the board, and really looking at kind of the overlap between community resilience and climate change, and like the intersectionality of all of these issues. So that, to me, is in a way what really makes this model stand out. And I guess I'm, kind of really love to hear any thoughts from participants. They can come off mute and share any comments that you have, or on the chat, any thoughts about implications for our little island communities here. One thing I guess I'm really interested by, because we do have access, we do have land now, and it's like part of what I'm really hearing from what I really heard from all three of the speakers is that what makes the CLT really successful is providing access to land, but enabling and working with community to build the housing on that land. It's not like just our organization needs to provide the land and all the housing. So it's like figuring out, how do we work with little groups of people? Maybe there's 4 or 5 people. Like when I saw, in a couple of the examples, there's just little clusters of 5 or 6 homes, and it's like, well, okay, we could, at Rainbow Ridge, where we own 50 acres, we could have a little cluster, and 5 or 6 or 7 people could come together and create a co-op, and that co-op could be the one that is charged with building the land and doing all of that other work. And so to me, that's one of the biggest takeaways from today, is figuring out how we as a community can empower the folks that are here that want housing to be in that leadership position, helping to create it. So that's certainly for me one of the takeaways coming out of today's discussion, is that, as an organization, we don't need to be doing everything. There may be opportunities to collaborate with community where we step forward as a partner. So that feels to me as a takeaway. I guess we're open to dialogue now. If you're on the call and you want to put something in the chat of your observations or thoughts for shaping the work that we do moving forward, between the Housing Society, the Community Foundation, and our 2 representatives that are at the SRD battling away for us. This is a chance to share your perspectives and your thoughts. So feel free to jump in. Mark, you go ahead, and if others are wanting to either raise your hand or just come off mute and jump in. But Mark, over to you.
Thanks, Edu. Actually, I just looked at the big picture of all who's on the line here. I just noticed Bruce Ellingson's on the line, was a regional director for Cortes at one point, and has seen a lot of the changes over Cortes. And Bruce, just wondering if you could share your reflections.
You're
muted
Bruce.
right now.
Thanks, Mark. That's really great.
Okay, thanks very much for the invite, Mark. Thank you very much, Sadhu, for organizing all of this and presenting such a good slate of information for us to consider. As far as dealing with the municipalities, or in our case, the SRD, I think it's incumbent on us to get the community support and work on that. And then we take that to the SRD to demonstrate what the community wants to have happen, and just let them massage it as they need to make the appropriate adjustments to our zoning bylaws to allow whatever we decide that we want to have done to proceed.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thanks, Bruce. And I'm going to call in one more person, if you don't mind, Sadhu. I know I've got a lot of board members here too, but I know Martha Abelson's here. She's been a long-term realtor on the island, has sort of seen the sort of traditional models of housing, and is involved in sort of private land ownership. Martha, would love your input or your reflections as well.
Well, thank you. I too feel like the promise of taking a group of people and doing a housing build for a group of people on the land that we have is a possibility to promote in the community and see how that model could work on the land, especially since we've had some difficulty in getting funding. I also, my observation was that it seems like most of the housing that was being built was single, small houses, but single houses. Regarding what's actually just happened in terms of purchasing the 3-acre property there on Point Road with 2 houses, one being designated to house the doctors. That's fabulous. I know you mentioned, Sadhu, that potential for other buildings there. My concern there is that there's the zoning, which looks like there would be support for more houses on that side of the property. However, there is another level of concern, which is that all of our zoning bylaws are subject to the sewerage septic level of confirmation of yes, permissions. So
Yeah.
right now, the septic level is actually almost above the zoning.
Yeah, it is.
And the septic issue, it requires 2.5 acres per,
Yeah.
et cetera. So there's a question
Yeah.
for that particular property.
And more broadly, one of the challenges with operating here is, you need a well and you need septic. And we have Vancouver Island Health has very clear regulations about anytime you have more than one house on a property. Now you need to test weekly for the water, and you need all these complicated systems. Martha, I'd love to talk to you about that offline, but we are in the process of designing a new septic system for that property, because it needs new septic. And so we're going to build new septic, and we're going to build it so that it can accommodate an additional 4 or 5 cabins. And we're going to try to go to a type 2, kind of a type 2 system that basically puts out almost drinking water quality effluent. And we're going to design it so that it can be that we can go to the type 2 if and when we get the zoning approval for that. So we'll try to design a system that's expandable in a way. But the barriers that you're raising are real. And I think, Mark and Robin, I think that is, in my conversation with other elected officials, I think there's collectively an awareness that is a real barrier, and it would be great for us to come up with unique solutions. That if you're doing composting toilets and you're doing really innovative rainwater collection, that there's some dispensation and allowances to kind of work creatively around sustainability, to not fall into the same kind of trap that drives construction costs up so much. So thanks, Martha, for that. While we're putting people on the spot, I'm going to Ruth. You're by Islander, so you have experience on Salt Spring as well as here on Cortes, and you've been a leader on the board of the Cortes Housing Society for many years, and you've done a ton of research on this. And I guess I'd love to hear any observations that you have coming out of today's conversation.
Thank you. Yeah. We moved for our kids to go to high school, and 20 years later, 15 years after they finished high school, we're still here. We're still going back and forth, trying to maintain 2 homes and share them in an appropriate way, because of course it's ridiculous to have 2 homes on 2 islands where there are so many people who don't have one solid home. And those people for the most part, are really essential to a community, particularly like Cortes, because we need the range of people, the volunteers helping the community clubs, the schools, and all of those things. It's been great to hear what you've really pulled together a wonderful panel for today. And I think it's fabulous that we have this new piece of property where we're going to be housing the doctors. Number one, that seems like it's taken care of. They've got a secure place, don't need to move out in the summertime. And then a rental home for somebody or somebody's else. There are a lot of zoning issues and things, and I wonder if we shouldn't focus back to Rainbow Ridge, not on the area where we have got plans to build housing for other people, but that project that we've talked about for so many years of, is it possible to provide land as a lease where people can build their own homes, and then the lease part of the land, the physical land, stays in community control, and the cost of it is not tied to the housing, which has just gone so ridiculously, which benefited those of us who bought in the 80s and 70s and 90s. But can we start with that project? Because it's going to be the same things to do what you were just talking about in terms of needing septic that's created for a group of however many homes. And are there people who want to sell their home on Cortes but remain there and own a smaller, have a smaller investment? Is that going to be a possibility? That's what I would like to look at.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you for raising that, and the board has given the thumbs up for exploring that as well. And today's discussion really was shaping a lot of my thinking about that too. So I'm glad you came back to that. And actually, Mark Von Esch and I have talked about that idea with the regional district as well, and there was interest there. So yeah, I think that's a really perfect example in a way to build off of today's discussion. I think our new purchase is, a few cabins can happen there, and there's creativity there that could be brought forward. I think the model that we talked about today is the perfect kind of thinking for Rainbow Ridge Phase 2 and Phase 3, because we aren't getting the money from the provincial government to build. Like, this is not, we've applied 3 or 4 times. And so we do need creativity, and we have it on this island. So I think I really agree with you. Yeah, John.
I'm going to have to leave here in a moment. I wanted to thank everyone for inviting me. But before I leave, I just wanted to observe that a lot of the discussion has centered on the idea of a parcel of land that you then develop a neighborhood on that parcel of land. Community Land Trust are also doing kind of 3 other approaches. One, where they're buying separate parcels of land and then allowing someone to build a house on those scattered parcels of land. Just as I think, Martha, you were mentioning the possibility of something like that. That's done quite frequently. Buy the land, hold the land, contract with an individual homeowner who wants to build a house on that land. Land trust hangs onto the land, homeowner has title to the house they just built. Secondly, many CLTs are not buying, or we're not building new housing, they're going out and acquiring existing housing. So you buy separate houses that already exist, already have the septic, already have the approval. You don't have to go through and get any permitting, but they buy the house, they rehab the house, sever title to the land and the house, sell off the house, hang on to the land. Third approach that many CLTs are taking is what they're calling buyer-initiated programs, where they get a pool of capital. They encourage the family to go out and find the house of their dreams, working with an independent broker, realtor, find that house, bring that house back to the CLT. The CLT buys the land, the homeowner buys the house. No permitting, no approvals, no zoning change. So it's a partnership where they're working together, but it's really the buyer who's in the lead, who's taking the initiative. But the CLT, of course, has to have the capital to be able to purchase the land that the would-be buyer brings, the deal that they bring to the CLT. So anyway, just kind of 3 other possibilities to throw into your program mix. It's not an either or where you either do development or you do buyer initiated. Many CLTs are doing both.
Mm.
Okay, that's enough for me. I should leave. Let
Thanks,
you have your
John.
conversation.
Thank you so much.
for
Yeah.
inviting me. Someday I'm gonna be in Cortes. I want to see what you've done.
We want to have you on Cortes, so we'll stay in touch for that to make that happen, John. That would be wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Nice to
Great.
meet a fellow New Englander. I'm from New Hampshire.
Yes, very good.
Great,
Bye.
thanks, John. Well, I'm gonna suggest that we start to wrap up. We've had so many of you stay on for so long, and it's a long part of your Saturday to be here. But yeah, I hope we can keep the conversation going. I do feel like the ideas that came up today just really resonate with the kind of the island spirit and the skills that we have and the partnerships we have with the regional district. Like it feels like the stars have kind of aligned. So really want to thank you for taking the time, all of you, and to so many of you for your leadership over many years, creating a resilient and sustainable community here on Cortes. And we have further steps to take, and I think we have everything we need to do that. So let today be the beginning of a conversation on how we work together to undertake that. So any closing thoughts, throw them in the chat. But to all of you, thanks for taking the time. Tracy, wonderful to see a Vancouverite on, and yeah, just really neat to see kind of the regional dialogue here. So thanks to all of you for taking time, and hope you have a great rest of the weekend. Don't forget, Seafest is going on. Those of you that are wanting to go, don't forget, you got a few more hours to go and enjoy that. So hopefully we'll see you there. And thanks everybody. We are recording today, so we will we'll package that up into a podcast. We'll work with Folk University to figure out how to really tell that story in ways that others that weren't here today can learn from. So thanks again, everybody. Take care.
Thank you, Sadhu. And thank you to the Community Foundation as well.
Great.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you for everything. It was amazing. Will you be sending out a link when the podcast becomes available?
Yes. And it'll be on Cortes Radio and on folku.ca, and we'll definitely send out a link when we have it.
Great. I'd love
Okay.
to share it.
Bye everybody. Thanks. Take care.
Thank
you.
you. Sadhu, thank you, everyone.
Thanks.